Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about the HOA that built garages on my land. I found out the hard way that owning one quiet sun-bleached acre inside a gated subdivision is less about peace and more about politics. My slice of dirt sits on the far edge of the neighborhood, an oddly shaped flag lot wrapped in a 6-foot cedar fence. I bought it 6 years ago because I needed storage for my vintage Airstream and a place to tinker on weekend carpentry projects without curious neighbors popping their heads over the hedge. The subdivision's bylaws classified the parcel as auxiliary residential, meaning I could park and build non-habitable structures as long as they stayed under 12 feet. Perfect. I poured a small concrete pad, rolled in the trailer, planted wildflowers along the perimeter, and for half a decade nobody bothered me. That changed the morning Daphne knocked. She wore a neatly pressed lilac blazer that matched the HOA lanyard dangling like a badge of honor. We hadn't seen each other since undergrad marketing class, a semester spent arguing over case studies, her gunning for extra credit, me just wanting to graduate debt-free. Daphne thrust a manila envelope into my hands and, without as much as a "how have you been," announced that the board had adopted Security Resolution 14B. The resolution, she said, required every homeowner with a locked exterior structure to provide 3 labeled keys, one for the on-call security contractor, one for maintenance, and one for the board. Safety, she said, as if the word fixed everything. I flipped through the stapled pages. My fence wasn't attached to a residence, so technically it counted as a structure. "You want keys to my gate?" I asked. 3 sets, she corrected, pointing to a clause highlighted in pink. "And you'll need to have them engraved in case they get mixed up." The absurdity made me laugh, and laughter made her jaw clench. I told her politely, well, politely enough, that the gate protected private property, not a clubhouse. Unless they had a warrant or a court order, nobody was walking in uninvited. Daphne's professional smile melted. "You can refuse," she said, "but there are penalties." She rattled them off. Daily fines, suspension of voting privileges, possible lien. I thanked her for the packet, wished her a pleasant afternoon, then set it unopened on top of the recycling bin. That night, I read the bylaws front to back. Nothing in them gave the board blanket authority to demand keys. Resolution 14B was a paper tiger, illegal and unenforceable. So I drafted a letter saying no, cited state statutes on unlawful search, sent it certified, and thought that was the end. A week later, Daphne emailed at 11:22 p.m., a timestamp that screamed frustration. Her message was short. "The board is disappointed by your non-compliance. We expect cooperation by May 15th. I ignored it. On May 16th, a violation notice arrived via courier, complete with a glossy photo of my closed gate as evidence of obstruction. They assessed a $50 fine. I appealed, and the fine paused while the committee scheduled a hearing. Meanwhile, 5 neighbors told me the board had asked for their shed keys too. 3 handed them over. 2 refused. I started keeping a log of every conversation, every letter, every timestamp. Years in corporate procurement taught me that paper trails win wars. The hearing convened in the clubhouse, a windowless box that smelled of lemon disinfectant and stale coffee. Daphne presided like a small-town judge. I presented my arguments: lack of authority, violation of privacy, potential liability if property went missing. She countered with vague concerns about emergency access and community cohesion. I kept my cool. Eventually, the board tabled the issue, promising a written decision within 30 days. By midsummer, threats of fines totaled almost $2,000, yet no formal decision arrived. My patience wore thin, but I refused to blink first. I replaced the padlock with a sturdier model and installed a battery-powered camera inside the gate, aimed at the only entry point. Its black plastic housing looked like an angry eye. For extra measure, I planted thorny bougainvillea along the fence line, half for privacy, half for spite. A friend in construction dropped off surplus rebar, and I slid lengths of it between the cedar slats to stiffen the fence against prying boards. If they tried to force their way in, they'd need more than bolt cutters. August came, and with it my first vacation in years. My parents, retired professors, had moved back to their birthplace, a coastal town 12 time zones away. I booked 3 weeks off work, lined up a house sitter for my main home, but decided not to burden him with the lot. After all, it was fenced and locked. Before leaving, I wrote Daphne a final letter. Any entry onto my property without permission will be treated as criminal trespass. I printed 2 copies, one sent by certified mail, the other slid under her door at 6 a.m. the morning of my flight. Then I turned off my phone, settled into an airplane seat, and watched clouds swallow the city. The first 5 days abroad were bliss. Sea breeze, strong coffee, long talks with my folks under a mango tree. On day 6, jet lag finally released me, and I checked email. Buried among work memos was a message from my neighbor Joel, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. my time. "Hey man, call me," it read, followed by 14 photos that made my stomach drop. The images showed bulldozers where my fence had been, and fresh lumber stacked like soldiers ready for inspection. One pic captured a printed site plan taped to a temporary post. In block letters, Phase 1, 17 garage units. Someone spray-painted bright orange X's on the asphalt where my trailer usually sat. The last photo zoomed in on a freshly poured footer trench, lines of steel rebar jutting like broken bones. I felt heat crawl up my neck. They'd ripped open my lot less than a week after I left. The timestamp on Joel's first photo? 2 days ago. They were moving fast. I called him through a spotty international connection. "It's bad," Joel said. "They told everyone you surrendered the land." He'd approached the construction foreman, who claimed the HOA held a unanimous easement, allowing new garages to solve the subdivision's parking crunch. Joel knew it was garbage but couldn't stop them. He'd taken the photos and kept quiet, hoping I'd see them in time. My flight home wasn't for another 2 weeks. I booked the soonest ticket, 36 hours out, and spent the interim making long-distance calls. First, my lawyer Mara, an old colleague turned real estate litigator. Second, the county clerk to verify no easement had been filed. Third, code enforcement to flag unpermitted construction. Each call added beads to the necklace of rage tightening around my throat. Mara pulled satellite imagery and confirmed fresh activity on my parcel. She drafted a cease and desist and sent it to the HOA's registered agent, plus a copy to their insurer for good measure. Because the work had already begun, she also filed an emergency injunction request with the county circuit court. I signed the affidavit electronically from my parents' dining table. The time difference meant we always talked at 3 a.m. my side, her side still dusk. Meanwhile, Joel fed me updates. The crew poured slab sections in a neat row, 11 in place by Friday, each labeled Unit A through Unit K. They used weather-resistant plywood forms and fast-setting concrete. Expensive, like they wanted it finished yesterday. Daphne supervised in yoga pants and a reflective vest, pointing at blueprints, phone glued to her ear. Joel said she looked like she'd won the lottery and was scared the ticket might blow away. He also noticed uniformed security patrolling, which the subdivision never hired before. Their presence felt less like protection and more like intimidation. I landed stateside on a humid Saturday at dawn, body clock shattered. Mara met me at arrivals with 2 coffees and a stack of papers. "Judge signed the temporary restraining order late last night," she said between sips. "It barred any further construction or occupancy on the parcel until ownership questions resolved. We needed to serve the order before Monday or risk the crew finishing roofs over the weekend. The courthouse clerk recommended knocking on gates ourselves and handing the stamped packet to anyone in charge. We drove straight from the airport, me unshaven, eyes bloodshot, still wearing clothes from the 16-hour flight. The subdivision gate guard lifted the arm when Mara flashed her bar card. As we rolled down the central avenue, I counted new no trespassing HOA project site signs staked into lawns. The board wanted the narrative clear. This was community progress, not theft. When we reached my lot, I barely recognized it. The cedar fence lay in a heap, cut into sections. My Airstream? Gone. Towed who knows where. In its place, 17 identical garage frames stood like a row of crooked teeth. Some already had siding. Others showed glittering nail heads catching the sun. And there, near a folding table covered in blueprints, was Daphne. Mara pulled the car over. I stepped out, TRO in hand, and marched toward my old classmate. 20 feet away, security intercepted, palms up. Mara spoke first, calm but firm. "We're here to serve a court order." She read the docket number aloud. Daphne's smugness cracked like an egg. She tried to call the site foreman, but Mara handed the packet to security and pointed at the line stating, "Any agent or representative on site. Service complete." The foreman shut down his compressor and corralled workers. The project froze mid-hammer. Some crews packed tools into trucks within minutes, not interested in being part of a lawsuit. Others lingered, watching the showdown like a soap opera. Daphne paced, phone glued to her ear again. I walked the perimeter, photographing every nail pile, every uprooted fence post, every footprint in fresh concrete. Document, document, document. Sheriff's deputies arrived within the hour. Mara called them en route to ensure peaceful compliance. They scanned the order, reminded Daphne that violating it could mean contempt of court, then locked up the temporary gate with zip ties and evidence tape. The lot sat silent, half-finished skeletons casting long, alien shadows on the dirt. That evening, I filed a police report for theft of the Airstream and destruction of property. Deputy Morales took notes under porch light glare, nodding as I relayed the timeline. "You've got one heck of a mess," he said. I told him messes get cleaned. Yet the bigger question loomed, how did Daphne and the board record an easement without my signature? Or did they fake it outright? Mara requested the subdivision's meeting minutes and financials under state nonprofit disclosure laws. She also subpoenaed their email correspondence. If forged documents existed, we'd find them. While Mara prepped discovery, I started my own quiet retaliation. The subdivision's covenants required any major capital improvement over $75,000 to be ratified by 2/3 of the homeowners. Common knowledge to anyone who bothered reading past page 10. I printed copies, highlighted the clause, and slid them into every mailbox at dawn one morning. Alongside the clause, I included a polite summary of events: fence destroyed, personal property missing, court order issued. No editorial commentary, just facts. By midweek, rumors outpaced summer humidity. Homeowners cornered Daphne at the dog park, demanding answers about budget overruns and potential dues increases. The word embezzlement entered whispers. 2 board members who'd rubber-stamped Resolution 14B started distancing themselves, claiming they'd been misled. It was the first crack in their facade, and I intended to widen it. Mara uncovered more. The board had opened a short-term construction loan for $240,000, using HOA reserve funds as collateral, a maneuver requiring a full membership vote they never held. Even worse, the loan documents listed my parcel's address as collateral under the heading Common Area Improvement. They'd recategorized my land on paper, probably hoping nobody would notice until the garages stood finished and the deed confusion became an expensive shrug. Armed with that revelation, we filed an amended complaint alleging fraud, civil conspiracy, and conversion. The dollar signs ballooned from nuisance levels to headline-worthy. Local reporters caught wind. A journalist named Serena called me, intrigued by the story of a neighborhood turning into a hostile takeover. I didn't sabotage my own lawsuit by giving quotes, but I pointed her to public court filings. Anyone could read the juicy parts. The next board meeting was standing room only. I arrived early, not to gloat, but to watch. Daphne's blazer was navy this time, hair immaculate, face strained. She hammered the gavel, tried to start the agenda, but homeowners peppered her with questions. Someone shouted, "Where's the money, Daphne?" Another brandished the TRO printout. Daphne called for order, but the chant, "Vote her out," gained rhythm. Just when chaos threatened, Mara stepped forward. She owned a townhome in the subdivision's rental pool, an overlooked fact that made her a voting member. She moved for a special election to recall the entire board. The motion passed by overwhelming voice vote. A recall meeting was scheduled for 30 days later, per bylaws. In a single week, Daphne's empire crumbled. Yet my Airstream was still missing, my land scarred, and construction liens hung over everything. Wins mattered, but cleanup loomed big. I spent evenings walking the site, replanting my wildflowers in plastic pots for safekeeping. The garage skeletons creaked in the night wind. One frame leaned after a summer storm. I called the deputy again, concerned about hazards. County inspectors tagged the structure unsafe, do not enter. If Daphne wanted to keep the project alive, she'd need to spend thousands shoring it up just to stand still. Late one Thursday, my phone buzzed, unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. It was Daphne. Her voice, once syrupy and self-assured, sounded frayed. She didn't apologize. Instead, she asked if we could negotiate an amicable resolution and avoid drawn-out litigation. I told her any offer must go through Mara. She pressed, hinting at a private settlement, maybe a joint venture splitting garage profits. The nerve. I hung up. The next morning, Mara emailed, Daphne's attorney proposed a buyout, $80,000 for my parcel, contingent on me dropping all claims. The figure made me laugh out loud. Between lost use, damaged property, and legal fees, we were already north of that. I told Mara to counter at cost to restore plus punitive damages. mid-six figures. We expected a rejection, which came within hours, but Daphne overplayed her hand one last time. That weekend, neighbors spotted men in unmarked trucks hauling building materials from the site at 3 a.m. They cut the sheriff's evidence tape, loaded plywood and power tools, and drove off. Joel sent me a grainy phone video. Mara forwarded it to the judge along with a contempt motion. Monday morning, deputies arrested the site foreman and cited Daphne for violating the TRO. She spent 6 hours in county lockup before posting bail. The mugshot landed on the local news. If she'd hoped for sympathy, the orange jumpsuit torpedoed it. The Monday after Daphne's unexpected mugshot debut, the subdivision woke to a fresh layer of gossip thicker than morning dew. Kids waiting for the bus whispered that the lady in the lilac blazers had been carted off in handcuffs. Retirees clustered at mailbox kiosks, waving copies of the county news. Even the gate guard, who normally frowned like a gargoyle, offered me a silent thumbs up as I drove in. The tide had turned. While neighborhood chatter settled into popcorn-crunching anticipation, Mara and I got busy turning Daphne's contempt blunder into courtroom artillery. A judge who already disliked rule breakers now had video of her agents slicing evidence tape at 3 a.m. Mara filed a motion to convert the temporary restraining order into a preliminary injunction with teeth, daily sanctions until the site was secured under third-party custody. The judge scheduled a hearing for Thursday and hinted over the phone that she expected all parties to appear in person. That put Daphne in a bind. Her own attorney, an HOA specialist named Trevor, who looked like he ironed his pocket squares, had begged her to stay low profile. Instead, she'd tripled down, and now he had to stand next to her while the judge replayed Joel's grainy nighttime footage. When Thursday came, the courtroom packed out. A few residents skipped work to watch, their phones tucked away but recording every facial twitch for the next neighborhood email thread. The judge summoned Trevor and Mara to the bench. I sat behind Mara, expression neutral. Daphne ducked her head but couldn't hide the prison-issue wristband marks still faint on her forearms. The judge spoke clearly. I find a willful violation of my order. Effective immediately, the property at issue is placed under the control of a court-appointed receiver. Then, to underline the point, she assessed a $2,000 fine for every additional day the receiver's access was impeded, payable personally by Daphne as board vice chair, not by the HOA's insurance. Trevor sagged, calculations spinning in his eyes. Outside the courthouse, Serena the reporter asked if I had comments. I kept it tight. I just want my land restored and my trailer back. She nodded, jotting shorthand. When she turned to Daphne for a statement, Daphne tried to power walk to a waiting sedan, but Serena lobbed one last question. Did you know you were trespassing? Daphne's cheeks flared crimson. Trevor muttered, "No comment," and slammed the door. That afternoon, the receiver, a crisp, no-nonsense property manager named Calvin, met Mara and me at the locked site gate. He carried a clipboard, a laser tape, and the calm authority of someone who'd babysat far worse real estate disasters. Two deputies removed the security chain Daphne's crew had relatched, and Calvin stepped through like a park ranger surveying storm damage. He logged every beam, every bag of cement, every tool left behind. Once I tally this, he said, the court will decide whether to scrap or finish the structures. I asked what finishing would even mean. Calvin shrugged. If ownership's in doubt, demolition's cheaper, but that decision is months away. Meanwhile, he posted laminated notices at each frame. Property in custodia leges, no work authorized. The Latin sounded dramatic, and that was the point. Trespass now meant contempt not just of me, but of the court itself. With the site frozen, we turned to missing trailer detective work. Deputy Morales traced the tow truck's license plate from Joel's photos to a storage yard 2 counties south. The yard manager produced a release form signed HOA Rep. The signature looked suspiciously like Daphne's curly initials. The Airstream sat in a back corner, dusty but intact. I drove down with Morales, paid the impound fee, and hauled my vintage baby home behind Mara's SUV. Onlookers waved when we rolled through the gate. The saga had its first tangible win, a shiny aluminum trophy glinting under subdivision streetlights. Yet victory tasted short. The HOA still threatened lien fines in mailed statements, computer-generated notices chugging along untouched by scandal. Mara advised we keep paying regular dues so they couldn't claim I'd defaulted on legitimate obligations. I wrote the checks with sarcastic precision. Memo line, monthly dues, not garage extortion. Meanwhile, the recall campaign gathered steam. Flyers sprouted like dandelions on bulletin boards. Special election. Hold your board accountable. A trio of residents, Paula, a retired high school principal, Lynn, a software engineer, and Hector, a mail carrier, formed a slate nicknamed the Clean Sweep. They canvassed door to door, explaining how Daphne's loan jeopardized reserve funds intended for roof replacements and pool maintenance. Turns out threatening people's summer swim time is the fastest way to spark outrage. Daphne tried counter-programming. She mailed glossy postcards showing artist renderings of sleek garages with solar roofs and community EV chargers, promising added property value. But the fine print still ignored that the land belonged to me, not the HOA. Residents saw through the spin. One evening, someone taped a garage postcard to the clubhouse door and scrawled fake news across it in red marker. Word traveled that Daphne's own next-door neighbor, Mr. Patel, planned to vote for clean sweep after Daphne's concrete trucks blocked his driveway for 3 hours. When you annoy people on trash collection day, forgiveness comes slow. As election day neared, Mara uncovered another grenade. Bank statements disclosed that the construction loan's first draw, $60,000, had been wired to a shell LLC registered a week prior under Daphne's personal mailing address. Trevor sputtered that it was likely a management entity, but the judge saw enough smoke to order a forensic accountant. The accountant's preliminary report flagged atypical disbursements for luxury spa services, boutique hotel stays, and a down payment on a sapphire tennis bracelet. Daphne's definition of site expenses stretched creativity. We amended our civil complaint again, adding counts for embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. Mara's legal documents now read like a Russian novel. Names, exhibits, footnotes galore. But complexity favored us. Every new finding made settlement costlier for Daphne. Then came an unexpected subplot. The contractor, a hard-driving builder named Roland, sued the HOA for unpaid invoices. He claimed he'd halted work after the TRO, but still deserved $110,000 for materials already purchased. Roland's petition included sworn testimony that Daphne had promised him fast-tracked permits and clear title to the land. He attached emails where Daphne wrote, "Don't worry about the owner, he's abroad for a month and won't fight." Roland's lawsuit, while aimed at the HOA, helped us by documenting Daphne's intent. As Mara joked, "Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy, but at least he files helpful exhibits." Election night arrived under a sky thick with August humidity. The clubhouse multi-purpose room turned into a polling station. Paper ballots, no electronic tally, a quirk of outdated bylaws that now added theater. Volunteers counted stacks under fluorescent buzz while residents hovered, sipping lemonade like it was championship ball. At 10:30, Paula stepped to the microphone and announced results. Clean Sweep won in a landslide, 78% of votes. Gasps, cheers, one lonely boo. Daphne, seated in the back, stared at her phone, thumbs motionless. Afterward, she slipped out a side door, paparazzi bulbs chasing her to a dark sedan that sped away without headlights for the first 100 yards. The new board's first act was to pass a resolution acknowledging my sole ownership of the fenced parcel and disavowing all garage construction. They also froze the HOA's bank account, pending full audit. Because Daphne remained under personal investigation, Trevor withdrew as her counsel, citing irreconcilable differences. In legalese, that translates to client stopped listening and stopped paying. Daphne retained a criminal defense attorney specializing in white-collar cases. Calvin, the receiver, invited bids for demolition. Two reputable crews quoted $45,000 to tear down the half-built garages and recycle materials. The court ordered Daphne to post a bond covering the projected cost plus 20% contingency. Her new attorney filed motions to delay, arguing the structures had potential community benefit. The judge wasn't impressed. Bond posted or demolition proceeds at HOA expense, recoverable from Daphne later. The ultimatum stood. Cornered, Daphne dipped into a home equity line of credit and posted bond. Demolition began 3 weeks later. I watched from a lawn chair across the street as excavators crunched pine framing like brittle breadsticks. Sledgehammers rang, dust plumed, and one by one the 17 would-be garages fell. The receiver let me salvage what I wanted first. I rescued 2 bundles of cedar boards, ironic payback since they destroyed my original fence, and a stack of perfectly good 2x6s. By sunset, the lot returned to bare dirt, pockmarked but mine again. With structures gone, we shifted focus to remediation. Heavy equipment had compacted soil, destroying my wildflower bed. Mara added restoration costs to damages. We hired an appraiser who documented decreased value during the ordeal and projected future appreciation once land was restored. The damages schedule now topped $580,000, excluding punitive multipliers. Trevor, or rather Daphne's new defense team, asked for mediation. The judge ordered both sides to attend a settlement conference. Mediation happened in a nondescript office building with stale coffee and chairs that squeaked if you breathed too hard. A retired judge served as mediator, his patience well practiced. Daphne looked older, dark circles under her eyes, blazer swapped for an understated cardigan. She opened with an apology, not the non-apology kind, but a genuine voice-cracking statement. I let ambition override ethics, and I'm ready to make things right. I listened, arms crossed. An apology doesn't repair concrete. Her first offer, reimburse legal fees, pay $120,000 in damages, plus a public letter clearing my name. I answered with our spreadsheet. Every receipt, impound fee, arborist quote, engineer estimate, total $612,300. Mediator whistled softly. Daphne's attorney whispered to her. She bit her lip, nodded. Counteroffer, $400,000 and a written apology circulated to all homeowners. Mara leaned toward me, eyebrow raised. Decent, but we could nudge higher. I suggested we'd settle at $450,000, half within 30 days, half over 12 months, secured by a lien on Daphne's residence. Mara presented it. We broke for lunch. Daphne paced the hallway on the phone lining up funds. After sandwiches nobody could taste, she agreed. Terms drafted, signatures exchanged, lien paperwork pre-notarized. My fight would end, time released. It wasn't the fiery court verdict some neighbors craved, but it funded repairs and penalized wrongdoing, and spared months of litigation drains. Cleanup began in earnest. Calvin supervised soil aeration and reseeding. I used part of the first payment to install a solar-powered security gate, my keys only, and an upgraded camera system whose footage auto-uploads to the cloud. Insurance covered new fencing. I chose steel posts this time. My Airstream, polished to mirror shine, reclaimed its pad under a shade sail. Where mangled frames once stood, bluebonnets sprouted again. The HOA, under clean sweep leadership, embarked on transparency reforms. They instituted open book accounting, quarterly town halls, and term limits. Hector convinced the board to host a fall chili cook-off where residents donated to a local shelter instead of paying an entry fee. The subdivision began to feel like a neighborhood rather than a fiefdom. As for Daphne, word spread that she quietly listed her house. When the lien recorded, potential buyers balked. She eventually sold at a discount to an investment couple who planned to rent it out. Neighbors whispered that she'd moved into a smaller condo across town, far from anyone who could point and say, "There goes the garage queen." Criminal charges? The DA offered a plea deal, restitution, already handled, and 2 years probation plus 200 hours of community service teaching business ethics workshops at the county library. Irony sits heavy sometimes. One crisp November evening, I wheeled the Airstream gate shut and breathed in cedar from the new fence. Mara texted, "Final payment cleared. Case closed." At last, silence. 2 weeks later, peace shattered. A huge package leaned on my porch, shipped from a dead mailing center. Inside sat a pristine 8-foot steel garage door. Same model ordered before the court halted construction. And a note. "Maybe you can build something useful. D." I photographed everything, filed it, and leaned the panels in my shop. Clean Sweep, our new board, posted budgets online and even cut dues after clawing back Daphne's spa day splurges. Streets once prickly turned chatty. In January, I spoke at the HOA meeting. Property rights matter. Transparency matters more. Trust your gut. Hector handed me a brass padlock with the HOA logo. Laughter meant healing. Restitution checks kept arriving. Serena's article on the library's business ethics class mentioned an unnamed speaker with first-hand fiduciary failure. One Saturday, I saw Daphne teaching behind glass, duty of care on the whiteboard. No triumph, just calm, consequences stuck. Spring light sparked a plan for the orphaned garage door. The clubhouse corkboard had rotted. Steel would last. I framed the panel with cedar from my wrecked fence, welded legs, and stenciled, "Community starts with respect." Volunteers set it in concrete. Soon, magnets held lost cat flyers and bake sale posters. Few knew the backstory, but everyone got the message. Life returned to sawdust and road trips. Each homecoming I glanced at the board. Piano lessons, car wash coupons, a crayon thank you. Revenge had become infrastructure. Roland, the builder, called in April. He'd saved reclaimed pine from the demolished garages. Did I want it? That lumber became a picnic table unveiled at our first outdoor movie night. Under string lights, Hector announced a refund. Insurance savings meant every household got a month of dues back. Applause felt better than any settlement. I met Daphne once more at the bus depot. Jeans, ponytail, no gems. Workshops are expanding, she said, trying to keep others from my mistakes. I wished her luck. She boarded her bus a little taller. Joel, the neighbor who'd snapped midnight photos, proposed a community garden on my lot. Clean Sweep approved. Calvin donated leftover steaks, and volunteers broke ground. Kids painted rock labels, retirees swapped compost tips. A plaque on the shed reads, "Boundaries honored become roots shared." Autumn painted the maples copper and kids strung paper lanterns between the garden beds for the harvest potluck. Parents swapped chili recipes, and someone plugged an old record player into a battery pack so bluegrass floated over the plots. Standing beside Joel, I realized every dish on the table featured something grown on land once buried under illegal concrete. That tasted like real justice, slow, nutritious, and shared. The final restitution check arrived in August with a note. "I wish you continued peace." Mara and I toasted with root beer. A podcaster later framed the saga this way: the hero wasn't a person, but the covenant that says your rights end where mine begin. On the bulletin board, I keep a tally. Fence destroyed, rebuilt stronger. Airstream kidnapped, recovered. 17 illegal garages recycled. $450,000 damages paid. HOA reborn, transparent. Steel door repurposed, thriving. 3 keys now buried under a peach sapling. Whenever I latch the gate, cicadas humming, I remember security isn't exclusion. It's invitation under fair terms. Wildflowers sway, bees drift, and entropy feels just a little outgunned. Friends, thank you. See you soon.